to see everybody here today. I'll tell you kind of another praise report. I don't know how many of y'all have checked it out, but I had Dusty send out to a lot of you there's a YouTube channel, a guy right at the bottom side of Tennessee. His name's Jimmy Pickett. And I've been following some of his teachings, and it lines up with everything that you can get to study right here. And I'd shared it with Chris here a while back. Well, Chris just happened to be in Alabama, so he made a little road trip up there, so he got to visit. Chris and Rhonda got to visit with Mr. Pickett. So if y'all ever have any questions, anything about Chris and Rhonda, get with them, and maybe they can share some stuff. But it's pretty amazing when you can go and you can see part of your family in other places. Because when you first hear this stuff, you're thinking, man, I got to be the only person that's hearing this. Matter of fact, it's a funny deal because Lanny and I was at the house the other day watching Jimmy Pickett, one of his messages, and he was doing the sin in the garden, and he was telling the people at his church, he said, God's led me to this, and he said, this may be a 1 in a million chance that you hear this. And said, you'll probably never hear it again. And he taught on the sin in the garden. And of course, Lanny said, 1 in a million. He said, he don't know we're in Texas. But what's amazing about it, get with Chris and them, but there's a lady in Sweetwater that follows them on YouTube. And they're going to refer our church to the lady in Sweetwater, and maybe someday she'll come here. I mean, isn't that amazing how God works? It's really amazing. But that's I told Chris, I said, Chris, you're going on these ventures without me, because me and him went on a bunch of them this past summer or this past fall. Makes me want to take off and go. So we're going to be back in chapter 8. We just finished chapter 7. Chapter 7 was about the seals. We covered 6 of them. They had asked me this morning, well, I didn't read about the 7th seal. Well, chapter 8, verse 1 is going to address that. But basically, if you really understand what chapter 7 is all about, it was about those 4 winds that were instructed to hold up. Those 4 winds are the 4 winds that bring about the end of this age. And God said, hold on. He sent an angel out there and said, hold on. Don't bring about the end until the election have it sealed in their forehead, these seals, to where they can't be deceived. And that's what these seals are for. And a lot of people get misunderstood in this. The seals are not in chronological order of the way they happen. They are in order of importance for you to know. Like the first seal that you read about was the false one comes on the scene first. And that is the most important for you to know. So those seals are not in order of how they're going to transpire, but they're in order of how you need to know the importance of what you need to know. Now, as we get into chapter 8, we're going to get into the trumps. And the trumps are in order of how this thing is going down. Okay? So, chapter 8, verse 1. And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half hour. So, this is the 7th seal right here. And when he opened it, there was a silence in heaven for about a half hour. Now you ask yourself, what is that trying to tell us? What is God trying to tell you about that? And you can go to, and I don't have it marked down, I don't think, but I'm going to go there because I'm going to read something to you, because y'all remember what happened on the 6th seal? I'm going to read to you what just got through transpiring prior to this 7th seal. Okay? And it says in Revelation 12, verse 7, and there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels, and prevailed not. neither was their place found any more in heaven. And that great dragon which was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So this seal right here in chapter 8, verse 1, is basically picking up right after Satan's kicked out of heaven. In other words, Satan's no longer there in heaven accusing all of you. God's not having to hear his accusations about you because he's kicked out. And then there's silence in heaven. And that's what it means. That's why there's silence in heaven, is because 12:7 has already come to pass and old Slewfoot's been kicked out. And now there was silence in heaven. And so that kind of completes the 7 seals. Now what do you gather out of all of that? What is important for God's election to get through those seals? That sealed, in other words, all of those seals in their mind, that way all the deception that Satan's fixing to bring on the earth, it's not going to affect you. Okay? We're going to go back over into Mark chapter 13, and we're going to because I want you to understand, God's election has to come to the knowledge of these seals. They have to understand what's going to come to pass. And from that, they're going to understand that Satan has planted a lot of lies into Christianity. So we're going to read in Mark 13, verse 28. It says, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When her branch is yet tender and put forth leaves, you know that the summer is nigh." Now notice, it didn't say anything about putting forth fruit right there, did it? And amazingly, Jesus always said, you will know them by their fruit. So when you gather in the information about the parable of the fig tree, you understand that in 1948, that little piece of land over there called Israel was declared a nation again. But from that, when you understand and you retain these seals and the knowledge that comes through this, you understand that there was 2 baskets, 2 shoots of trees put out in that little old nation. And one of those trees is not going to bear fruit. And it's full of deception, it's full of lies, and we read about it. Where did they come from? They come from all the way down from Cain. And their whole agenda is to bring in a one-world government and have the whole world feeding upon that. And basically, that's what's controlling that little piece of land today. And the knowledge that you're to retain in your forehead is to know the difference between the good figs over there and the bad figs. And that deal's really getting heated up. That's why through all of this time we've sent you videos on the USS Liberty so you can understand what the Kenite can actually drag even a nation like America right into because of the ignorance and the not knowing this parable of the fig tree. And it'll drag you right into a world war through lies and deceit. So we're going to go on. So there he says, you know that the summer is nigh. So you in like manner, when you shall see these things come to pass, know that it is nigh, even at the door. In other words, you have in your mind that you know that it's not an any moment fly away doctrine. You know that things have to transpire and be fulfilled, and that God has got you in a field working because you understand that Satan's deception and his lie is to yank people out of here without them having the knowledge of who they're following. Okay? And it says, verily I say unto you that this generation shall not pass away until all these things be done. Well, what things did we just read about in Mark 13? Did we read about flying away? No. As a matter of fact, it's almost like the whole chapter of Mark 13 is basically giving you an analogy that as a woman has birth pains, they become closer and closer together and stronger till eventually they're going to give birth. And he's using that analogy because he's wanting you to know that we're about to go into a new heaven and earth age. Okay? And you've got to be sealed in your forehead and understand that we have a job to do. And it says, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But that day and that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels, nor are in heaven neither the Son, but the Father. In other words, you're not going to know the year, you're not going to know the day, you're not going to know the hour. But he's basically telling you right here, those seals are going to let you know the events that's going to consummate the end of that age.
It says, heaven and earth shall pass away. Does that mean because when the millennium comes, it's kind of a combined deal? It's heaven on earth. Is that why it says it'll pass away?
I mean, that's exactly. I mean, this flesh age is going to pass away. In other words.
Okay. All right. So we won't have any reason to talk about heaven and earth because we'll all be in the millennium together.
In eternity, that's. You know where heaven is? I mean, y'all know where heaven is. It's wherever God is. That's where heaven is.
Okay.
And it says, take heed, watch and pray, for ye know not when this time is. For the Son of Man is a man taking a far journey, and has left his house, and gave authority to his servants, and to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. It says, watch ye therefore, for you know not when the master of the house cometh, at evening, or midnight, or the cock croweth, or in the morning, unless suddenly he shall find you sleeping. And what I say unto you, I shall say unto all, watch. Now, what I want you to gather out of that is Satan has sown into this whole world, and we're going to get into it here in just a minute, lies and deception about at any moment fly-away doctrine. And sadly, everybody's flocking to that. And that's the purpose of God's election. So I wanted to cover Mark 13 so you can understand those seals place in your mind all of the events that bring about the consummation of a new age. Well, it says that generation that sees that nation and those two shoots put out over there will not pass away. In other words, the generation that gets to witness that is not going to die before all these things transpire. Now, what's unique about that, when you go into His Word and you study about generations, you can get, there's different numbers. There's a 40-year generation, 70-year generation, and a 120-year generation. Well, I'm here to tell you that generation since 1948 is getting gray-headed. And it's getting some age on it. And this is not my words. This is what His words say. That generation will not pass away until all these things be fulfilled. Now, go back over into Revelation again. So that was the purpose of the sealing. That's why those seals are so important for you to retain into your mind, to know the events that's got to transpire. Verse 2 of chapter 8. And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So now we're fixing to get into the trumpets. And the trumpets are basically commanded to basically take action, okay? And another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of the saints, and upon the golden altar which was before his throne. So, what are these prayers of the saints? Who are the saints? God's election. These are the ones that's been set aside, preordained before the foundation of this world. And the prayers of the prayers of the election is this, that all of them have loved ones that you just pray for them to come to the knowledge of the truth. Okay? We all have loved ones that we're praying that they come to the full knowledge of truth and they're not deceived by the enemy and all the lies that is placed into this thing by Satan. So, here's what's amazing, because I know some people you probably sowed seeds with and you've been probably praying for them, and they probably think you're crazy. But what he's telling you right here is, those prayers have not went unheard. He's got them in a bottle until the end's fixing to play out right here. And he told this angel, go get those incense, and basically those prayers are going to go up to God. It's the same as in chapter 5 of Revelation. I'll read it for you. It talks about it in chapter 5 also. It talks about, and when he had taken the book, in verse 8, and when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. So that was the vision that he seen. He seen them 24 elders have vials, and in those vials are the very prayers that you're praying for people to come to the knowledge of the full truth. So what you find in that is just relax and be comfortable, because God's on the throne, and all he asks you to do is plant seeds and pray for them. Don't get worked up because somebody's not hearing you right now, okay? Then it goes on. And the smoke of the incense which came up with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God and out of the angel's hands. How many of y'all remember a verse in Revelation to where one of John's visions was he seen people crying at the altar saying, how long, O Lord, crying out, how long, O Lord, before you avenge those that have brought all this upon the world? How many of y'all remember that? Now think about that. We run around in this thing and wonder, it's easy to think, man, the wicked are always prospering and getting ahead. But there was God's election had been saying, how long, O Lord, is it going to be before you settle the score on all of this? And he's telling you right here, all of them prayers are bottled up, and I'm fixing to get them out. Okay? So that's where we're at. Verse 5. And the angel took the censer and he filled it with fire of the altar, and he cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquakes. People read that and they think, man, what is that? What that's saying is, that's God bringing conviction upon people's hearts. When he pours out the prayers, and he goes up to God, and God starts answering those prayers, and he starts bringing conviction upon one's heart, and starts bringing them to the knowledge of the truth. I can remember a time in my life when, don't get me wrong, I was a believer and I was saved and everything, but I was being convicted about not knowing what truth was or error. I did not know what was wrong and what was right. I would go to one church and I'd hear this, and I'd go to another church and I'd hear this, and I'm like, God, who are you? So here, God's pouring out the conviction to bring one's heart to the true knowledge of Him. Okay? Now watch this. And the 7 angels which had 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Oh, we're getting down to it now. And the first angel sounded. And there followed hail and fire and mingled with blood. And they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees were burnt up. And all the green grass was burnt up. You know, people read that and they don't understand that God uses figures of speech. He uses examples through animals and plants. And they don't even know that He uses that kind of figures of speech. So they don't know what He's talking about. Just like in Genesis, we broke down what a tree is. And we've seen how God uses trees as symbolic for being people. So here, what He's telling you is that this is the deception that's going to fall upon the land. Anytime that this Bible deals with the third, what do y'all think that's dealing with?
For the falling.
Those
third that followed Satan in the first earth age. Okay? So in other words, that third is easily deceived. In other words, they don't want to know who He is, and they really don't care who He is. They're going to follow anything they believe or anything they hear. And they're going to believe it without checking it out. So what He's telling you right here in this first trump is all of this deception is going to fall on what? That 1/3. Okay? Now, who's not in that number of the 1/3? The ones that have what? Those seals that we read about in chapter 7 and verse 1 of 8. If you've got those sealed in your mind, you're not going to fall for that deception, okay? And so keep that in mind. Separate that out in your mind. When it talks about 1/3, it's talking about those 1/3 that are easily deceived. And the second angel sounded, as it were a great mountain burning with fire, and was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood. Now, there again, you have that third. And when it talks about they became blood, in other words, all of the deception spiritually killed them. Spiritually, not fleshly. That's the problem. Everybody don't think about it being spiritual here. They think about this being in the flesh. But I'm telling you right now, God works about in the spiritual realm. He put us in a flesh body so people could have free will. But He works in the realm of your spiritual man. That's why He tells you, don't walk in the flesh. Walk in the Spirit. So here, all of that deception causes 1/3, those that are easy to be deceived, to spiritually die. Okay? Now, you say, well, that's talking about the seeds. That ain't talking about people. Go with me to Revelation 17. Because I want you to get this in your mind, how God works, especially in the book of Revelation. In 17:15, Revelation 17:15, it says, and He said unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth, in other words, the waters to where all the deceived people are sitting is what He's saying. That's what He's calling the whore there. What makes it be a whore?
They're not virgins to Christ.
They're not a virgin for Christ. They have worshiped somebody else before the true Christ comes on the scene. Okay? So He's saying right here, and He said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are the peoples, the multitudes, and the nations, and the tongues. So those seas of water, in other words, it's a sea of people. It's a whole bunch of people, is what He's telling you there. Become dead. And it says, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. And the third part of the ships were destroyed. There again, you can't think about that as literally ships, because anytime it's talking about ships in the Bible, most of the time it's about commerce. So now, I want y'all to gather this in your mind just a little bit, because if you could understand how God intended for people to live and take care of each other, and Satan's been against that from day one. You say, how has he been against it? Well, God had this thing to where used to you could, if this old man had a milk cow and Rosine had chickens, they could take that milk and trade it for eggs. And God's family takes care of each other that way. Well, old Slewfoot throws something into the equation, and he puts middlemen into all of those markets, and they become speculators. And they're really something, because they prop themselves up. They're educated to do this kind of stuff. And because of the commerce system in a one-world system, they cause a lot of people to spiritually die. And you say, well, wait a minute. Now, this is pretty good. This global economy's brought a lot of wealth. Yeah, and now we depend on the global economy. In other words, now you're a slave to his system. Do you see what I'm saying? So he's telling you right here, get the knowledge in your mind not to fall prey to what the enemy's doing to the world. Because he's about got it. If COVID didn't prove that to you, I don't know what will. You couldn't even buy a vehicle because you're dependent on another country. I'm telling you, anytime Satan wants to do it, he can take your communication away from you. He can take your electricity away from you. He can do all of those things. So it's important for you to have those seals. Okay? So when you read about ships, it's talking about the commerce system. In verse 10, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers. There again, we have that third part, and upon the fountains of waters. Now you read that and you think, man, what is that? It kind of goes along with in Luke chapter 10, I believe it is. Jesus says, and I beheld, and I see Satan as he was falling like lightning coming from heaven. But what this is talking about right here is it's talking about, I'm going to read it again. So what does a lamp do? It puts off light, don't it? Okay. Now I want you to follow this. We're going to read it. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. In other words, as it were, it's almost like he's trying to copy the true light. You see what I'm saying? As it were a lamp. It's really, and what they're doing is they're bringing in a bunch of lies, in other words. They don't have truth, but they masquerade around like they're full of truth. And there's no truth in them. And they're running around like they're an angel of light, but really they're a wolves in sheep clothing. Now Jesus gives us a warning about them in the first of Mark, didn't he? Yeah, he did. He gave us a warning about it. And it says, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. In other words, all of these lies are going to be presented to those people that are easily deceived, that don't want to know who their father is. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to bite on it, hook, line, and sinker. They're going to gather up. They're going to look religious. They're going to look holy. And what's sad is they're confused because they bought the lies. because they followed the lamp as it were a lamp. In verse 11, and the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. Or read it like this. The third part of the people became wormwood. Remember this. Do not lose this in your mind. A third part in the first heaven and earth age, a third part was pulled aside and deceived by Satan. And now God has placed them in the very end of this flesh age as an opportunity for them to come out of it. But you know what happens? They're easily deceived again. Now, that word wormwood, when you hear that, you're thinking, man, what is that? When you look that word up into concordance, how many of y'all looked it up? I believe it's number 894 in your concordance. And it's translated bitter. So 1/3 of the people become bitter. You can even translate it to calamity, like a bunch of destruction comes upon them. All because of the lies that has transpired in these other trumps that have been blown. Okay? Does everybody understand that? And many men died in the waters and because they were made bitter. And the fourth angel sounded. And a third part of the sun was smitten. And the third part of the moon and the third part of the stars. So the third part of them was darkened. In other words, those that are easily deceived have become dark in their own heart. Even though they're masquerading as what? Religious. I be Christian. I be Christian. People, if I can convince you to do one thing, don't take my word for it. Don't take any man's word for it. You have to use the scriptures to test the teachers out. And if it's not of God, you don't want any part of it. Because Jesus gives you warning about a fake Jesus. Okay? And it says in verse 13, and I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of their voices, of other voices of the trumpet, and of the three angels which are yet to sound. Now, chapter 9 is fixing to get into the woe trumps. Do y'all know what woe means? It's a warning in a sense. And in other words, I heard something just the other day. Pastor Murray, when he teaches on this, he said the original manuscripts, the older manuscripts, is translated, it's not angel there, it's eagle. And he does a teaching on it. He said, I don't know if you've ever been out in a canyon when an eagle screeches through the canyon. It's like a sound of urgency that eagle's putting out. And it's like God's using that analogy. If you could just let your mind go there, if you was the bottom of that canyon and you heard that eagle screech out, you would get attention to it. And that's what it's saying here. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Everybody understand that? So we've gotten through 4 trumps. Let's get into chapter 9. And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Uh-oh. What's in the bottomless pit? All of those evil spirits, those fallen angels. They're in that bottomless pit. So now an angel, here in the 5th trump, an angel's got the key to it. And amazingly, I want to ask y'all a question. happened during Noah's days? How was man's relationship with God during the days of Noah? Not very good, was it? Pretty perverted, wasn't it? Do y'all need any examples? We can't get that graphic today. But those fallen angels were taking the daughters of men to wives. Okay? Now, can you imagine if those fallen angels caused it then? Can you imagine whenever this angel comes down there and unlocks his pit and loosed out of there what's coming again? Let's read on. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. So what do y'all think's causing that the sun to be darkened? What do you think the smoke is? Let's go over to the book of Joel. Joel chapter 2, verse 10. And the earth shall quake before them, and the heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw from shining. And the Lord shall utter his voice unto his army. For his camp is very great, and he is strong that execute his word. For the day of the Lord is great. What that's telling you is that God's got a locust army that he's fixing to loose out of that pit. And you say, well, why would God do that? Why would God do that? People, I want you to understand that God has poured out every ounce of love for his children. To the point that he sent his own son to be crucified so that maybe you might accept that and get to know who your Father is. Yet the majority of these people are running around and don't want to know who he really is. And so he's got this army. I know people get confused when you call it God's army, because they devour stuff. How many of y'all know what a locust does? Let me ask y'all this. How many of y'all got grasshoppers right now? Huh? Plant you a garden. And what happens to your fruit trees right now? They devour it, don't they? Okay. So God's got this locust army that's going to devour some stuff. Now, what do you think it's going to devour? Everything that does not have what? The seal of God in their forehead. Let's read on just a little bit more. Let's go back to chapter 9. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit. And as the smoke of a great furnace, then the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and upon them was given power, as scorpions of the earth have power. So picture this in your mind. There's a whole bunch of locusts that's going to come out of the bottomless pit, and it's going to darken the skies. Okay? But really what it's doing is it's bringing darkness to one's heart is what it does. Watch this. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass or the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree. In other words, these are not like your grasshoppers that you have on your farm today. He's using that as an analogy because you know too well if you plant a fruit tree out there, these grasshoppers will eat it up. And he's telling you right now, that's how this army's going to be. And it says, it was commanded neither hurt any green thing or neither tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their forehead. So who do you think that locust army is going to go after? Who can he not go after? How come he can't affect you? Because you know what's coming. Because you've been sealed by what the Word says. Now let me ask you this question. Is that taught in most churches today? No. I wonder why. Because I'll fly away. That's why. That's what they've been taught. It looks religious, but it ain't going to put the seal of God in your forehead. Matter of fact, it's a lie. And it's put into this thing that everybody that's going to be deceived is going to follow that. And what you're going to find out is the people following it is part of that 1/3. So if you've got some loved ones that's following that garbage, you're in the field working for your Father for a reason. And yes, it's going to cause some hardships here and there. It's not an easy task. But I'm telling you this, Jesus going to the cross wasn't an easy task. And all he asks you to do is just pick up your cross and follow him. He didn't tell you it was going to be easy. Let's go a little bit further. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but they should torment them for 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. Now, that's a whole nother teaching in itself. We're going to kind of get into that a little bit. How many of y'all know the makeup of a scorpion? How does a scorpion defeat its prey? It's got a stinger on it. First of all, that scorpion don't have a stomach. So it can't digest its own food. So that scorpion will sting it and inject a poison into it. And then it would take its pinchers and take juices and inject in to its prey. And you know what that poison does to them? It turns it to mush. It basically destroys the backbone of it. And then it can basically take in the juices that it's turned it to. So what he's telling you right there is all the lies and all the deception is going to take the backbone, the very backbone from God's people. To where they don't have enough backbone to stand up against their real enemy, which is Satan. That's what he's telling you right there. Through all the deception and all the lies that's been pumped into this thing, it makes wimps. Because they want to run around under a religious umbrella. But the truth is, they never get around to telling the truth. Okay? Does everybody understand that? Now watch this. In verse 6. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. Now what's that talking of? How many of y'all know what that's talking of right there? Can you imagine being a Christian all your life, sitting on the front row of your church, just waiting on a rapture? singing I'll Fly Away. And old Slewfoot comes in here, lands over into Jerusalem. That's what you were told to watch in Mark 13. You be watching that little old nation over there. Watch is what he said. That's the last thing in Mark was watch. Watch it. Watch him go right over there and desecrate the very place that was supposed to be holy for God. And have a message that he comes to fly you away. Looking just like the Jesus that's painted on your wall in your picture. That's what happens at the sixth trump and the sixth seal. But can you imagine, you've been a churchgoer all your life, and you find yourself following that, and then the true one comes. Then what do? Uh-oh. Then you go to looking for the rocks to fall on you. No longer is it fig leaves sewing together because to hide your shame. You want the mountains and the rocks to fall upon you. People, if you don't study to show yourself approved in this word, and you just listen to the traditions of man, you're going to find yourself right there one day if you're not careful. So if God has given you eyes to see, if he's brought you out of confusion, I find this amazing. You say, well, what? You saying Christians are confused? Yes. The majority of Christians are still in Babylon. You say, what do you mean by that? They have brought the Babylonian practices right into the house of God. That was never meant to be in there. And they've added to it over time and time and time again. And we run around believing lies, thinking it's holy. And we wind up taking an abominable day and making it a holy day. People, I know this is heavy, but I want you to know this. You're here for a reason. You're not going to hear this in a lot of places unless you go to looking for it. And what you're going to find is it's almost strategically placed by God throughout the world for a reason. We're going to stop right there before we get into these other trumps because it's fixing to get good. Does anybody have any questions, any comments? I'm going to ask y'all again, how do you think Satan pulled away 1/3 of God's children in the first earth age? How do y'all think he did it? How did he do it? How did he convince 1/3 to follow him? That's what it says in Revelation. He drew 1/3 of his own children, God's own children, to follow him in the first earth age. I bet you I bet you it happened like this. How many of y'all have ever seen a cartoon of Satan? He's red, he's got horns, he's got a pitchfork. I bet he took that pitchfork to him and said, I'm going to put this to your throat, and if you don't follow me, I'm going to kill you. Huh?
No.
No? Well, how does he get 1/3 of them to go with him? By deception. By convincing them that he was God. Because he's sitting and guarding the throne. By convincing him that he was someone special. Now, if that battle has already played out in the first earth age, what do you think is going to happen at the end of this one? Same thing. Even this. Not my words. It says he's going to work miracles right in the side of men. In other words, you're going to be able to go into a, quote, Christian church, and Satan's going to work miracles right in the side of men to lead them right to the false one. So I encourage you, check out the Word. Don't ever get away from the Word, because there's a lot of deception poured out. Those first 3 trumps is basically about pouring deception into the world. How it's causing 1/3 to be spiritually dead. Do y'all know what that means to be spiritually dead?
Be dead.
So check it out. I don't want this to scare you. You know why? Because you've got seals. We've read them. You've got knowledge in your forehead to know how it's going to go down. Therefore, it can't overtake you. Matter of fact, here's what the instructions was. I mean, picture this. Picture God saying, you can't go down there and touch those that have the seal of God in their forehead. But here's what's unique about that. What that's like, I'm going to give you an analogy of what that's like. That's like a head coach on a football team, and you're playing this team, and you know you got some players that you know that can stop anything. And this other team gets a drive going, and they drive and they get inside the 20, and finally that head coach says, "All right, get in there, get in there." And he sends in his people. Not that they're not going to have to experience some of the same things, but those things are not going to affect them. And therefore, they stop the enemy right there. That's what God's doing with his election. He's countering. He's really showing Satan how weak he really was. That through all the deception, from the very beginning, God had predestinated this to happen. I thank God for that. Any other comments? Any other questions? No comments? No questions?
Things are happening. I mean, this is not in the future, right? I mean,
Them Trumps right there doesn't happen.
that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Because a lot of people think, oh, we'll wait for the.
No, them.
Yeah.
They've done happen.
We're in the fifth, aren't we? Are we in the fifth Trump?
We're in the 5th Trump. And that Trump is a time to be taught.
And this is chronological order, so.
It's in order. And I know it's real easy to sit back and say, yeah, but my preacher said we're going to be raptured out and we don't need to know that. And my answer to you is God wasted a whole lot of paper to write it all down for you if you don't need to know it. So you need to call him and tell him that the climate control people are mad because he wasted a tree. Our Father put a lot of emphasis on Revelations for a reason. And matter of fact, he took John there. I mean, y'all got to picture this in your mind. Not only could he tell John about it in the flesh, he had to take him there in the spirit and show it to him. Because it's important that you and I get it.
Elton,
Yes.
I realize where the theory that 15 years ago I sat in Sunday school class. And one of the gentlemen said, well, that earth's going to burn, so we're going to be raptured. That deception, it started, I've heard that plumb back for years.
Yep.
And my question was to the individual, okay, each day, 1,000 years or whatever, that God worked and created everything. And at the end of that day, he said it's good. Why would a loving God create something that he says is good and then going to destroy it? He's going to clean this thing up.
That's what's going to
He's
burn.
not going to destroy it.
He's going to burn all the evil that's in this world. He's going to burn it up. Evil thoughts, evil actions, it's all going to be burned up.
So your flesh is weak, but your spirit's strong. You got to listen to the spirit.
You got to hearken to the Spirit. Any other questions? Any other comments? Well, if you will, bow with me then. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you this day, Father. Father, I just want to thank you for all of the prayers that this church body has lifted up to you, Father. I thank you for the comfort knowing that even though they haven't been answered yet, Father, we know that through your word, they're going to be answered. And I thank you for that, Father. I thank you for hearing them. I thank you for making your plan known. Father, I just pray that you equip us with the knowledge and the wisdom. Give us understanding of the meaning of this word, Father. Father, I pray that we don't lean upon our own understanding, but that we come to you with a humble spirit and asking you for the knowledge and the wisdom that's in this word, Father. Father, I thank you for the body that you assemble in this church body, Father. I thank you for it. I thank you for the love that they have to want to extend that love into other people's lives, even though it may be uncomfortable at the very beginning, Father. Father, I pray that you give them thick skin so that no weapon formed against them is going to prosper. Give them eyes to see, Father, and ears to hear. And once again, Father, we thank you for this word. We pray as we go our separate ways, Father, let us be able to sow a seed in one's life. And let it be your will that that seed take root. I thank you, Father. I thank you. I love you. I just want to live my life to honor you and glorify you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.